I mean, I think 3D printers realistically are a lot of people's gateway drugs into making these days, especially with kids. I mean, I saw it when I was working at the makerspace. A lot of kids were getting like 3D printers for Christmas, and they were just like downloading, models from Thingiverse, and it's really easy to get started. I do think a big shift that is going to happen is teaching 3D modeling at a young age, because I noticed a lot of those kids had no idea how to make their own models. And I think coding has become a lot more common in schools. Especially like when I was in high school, you could take one coding class, but now I know it's way more common. So I'm assuming something similar is going to start happening with 3D modeling, but I feel like the education around 3D modeling is still very delayed with what is available in terms of 3D printers. So I still feel like there's a bit of a gap that needs to be made up for. But in terms of like, what would I suggest someone to get as their gateway drug into making? I mean, strangely enough, leatherworking, if you don't have a workshop or a lot of money, it's a great way to be able to make something of a very high quality right off the bat. That's something I loved about leatherworking. Like if you get nice leather and you follow a set of plans or a tutorial or something, it's amazing how nice of a thing you get out of it, because most store-bought leather goods, are made from really cheap leather or very thin leather, or that leather that's all chopped up and then glued back together. So that for me like sparked this, instant urge to do it a lot more. So I would say leatherworking. I would recommend that to a lot of people. All right, we got some questions coming in, so let me go through. Someone asked what my favorite infill is from Reston Pizza. I actually have not experimented with infills as much as I would like to. On the Prusa knowledge database, they have this really cool page about infills, and they have some really funky, like artistic ones that I would love to try. But I usually just use gyroid or rectilinear. Gyroid because they say it's, mostly strong in both directions. Rectilinear because there's less shake on the printer and it's a little faster. Am I a Leafs fan? Unfortunately, I don't really follow hockey, so they're great. I don't really care though. AutoCAD. Yeah. So Vikshay, I also learned AutoCAD in university. Same thing. Like, because I studied civil engineering, and AutoCAD is sort of the industry standard in architecture and design and all of that. The industry was starting to transition to Revit and like other building information modeling softwares, but Fusion 360 and like Blender and those sorts of things were much more common in mechanical engineering. But I even think if you were taking a mechanical engineering degree at my university, you probably wouldn't learn Fusion. So same thing. There's this like, it seems like there's some sort of education gap. 3D printing in many ways still very seems like a grassroots self-taught thing for many, many people. I know, but I can't say because I didn't, that's not what I studied. Did you pay Fusion 360? Yes, I paid for the Fusion 360 license, but they do have a free version. Have I ever tried to make a tiny house? I haven't, but that would be super cool. I don't know if I would love living in a tiny house. I've actually thought about a lot about this. Eden and I have talked about it. I have this fantasy that I could live like a minimalist lifestyle and be happy, but this is my reality. My work involves a lot of stuff like woodworking and 3D printing and all this equipment. So being in a very small space, I don't know how realistic that is with what I do. It would be awesome to live out of a backpack, but I don't know, at this point in my life, having a more spread out home base is very nice. So if I was in a very warm climate where I could spend a lot of time outside, being in a tiny house would be really cool. But for my own life, I think I'm a little more interested in building like a non-tiny house or renovating a house. But I could see myself doing it someday when that happens. Hunter Daniel says, when you do your pallet builds, how do you know it's going to be good wood? I got a couple pallets recently and they were all pine with 2 oak boards. So, caveat, I am not an expert in pallet wood furniture. There's many people who have done a lot more than I have. That being said, if you take a slice off the end grain, pine or other softwoods, the grain will typically be a lot more spread out and the boards will crack and splinter a lot easier. It's really easy when you have pine and a hardwood in the same pallet. Then you can like really feel the difference between the two. Um, it's best if you can identify it before you pick it up. If you want to just only get hardwood pallets, then you're not grabbing something and then you have to deal with this big, heavy pallet. But there's many people who have done more with pallets who may do better, have a better answer than that for me. Yaron asks how old I am. I am 25. Shout out to Zito. Yes, I love Andrew. He's awesome. We hung out at the Catskill Mountain Maker Camp this year, which was super fun. David wants to know, is there a free version of Revit? All AutoCAD softwares have a student version. Obviously, that's not free because a university education is far from free. But I doubt there's a free version because that software is like made for the building industry. I don't really know how many people are using it as hobbyists, but who knows? There might be. How did I learn fast with woodwork? And I guess totally separate question. Any tips to be more creative? I think you might want to be careful with learning fast. When you're learning something for the first time, I think it's really worth it to take your time. And if you can, learn with someone else. The best way to learn anything, I believe, is with a teacher. When you're with someone and they can correct you in the moment, you will get over so many bad habits so much faster than if you try to teach yourself and then unlearn them later on. But, that being said, a lot of my woodworking was self-taught. And I think with any craft, the best way to learn is through a project. So for me, my first on my own small woodworking project was I was in university. My bedroom was tiny. I was living with 3 other roommates and I didn't have enough room for a nightstand. So in one of my classes, I started fantasizing about this headboard nightstand that could slide over. And I became obsessed with building this very simple woodworked item. So I borrowed some tools, got some free plywood from a dumpster because there was a renovation happening at the gym complex at McGill. And I built it and it was very, very satisfying. So having a project is a great way to learn a bunch of skills. There's going to be the skills that you anticipate and the ones that just come up during the process. But like anything, it takes time. But if your question is about learning fast with a teacher, I think is the best way to learn fast. So take a class. Spend a bit of money if you want to learn fast and do it safely and do it with someone who knows what they're doing. And any tips to be more creative? So some people had questions about this last week as well. And I was a little tongue-tied because, creativity as a topic is really, really big. And there are so many things that go into it. And I think maybe the easiest way to answer that question is to draw on my most recent experiences. So I think doing things that you're excited about is really important. So in this month, I knew I was going to make 3 or 4 videos in November, and I had maybe 5 or 6 ideas. And that was really great because it allowed me to, as I approached the week where I was starting video production, be like, okay, that video is the one I'm excited about. And that is what I'm going to work on. So following those excitements and the things that are really tickling you is really, really big because that will motivate you to get over all of the humps. If you're working on a project that you're not excited about and you encounter problems, then it's hard to stay resilient. So finding those projects that you're excited about for whatever reason, I think is a great first step. And I think another thing that is hard to do if you haven't been trained on it in a team setting is good brainstorming. So, you may have done brainstorming in a group project or at an office, but it's equally important, I think, if you're doing creative work to brainstorm on your own. So the typewriter, which is just out of frame over here, that's one of the main things I do with this these days because it's so fun to use. It's a great motivation to actually sit down and write, which for me, that's what brainstorming looks like. I make these sort of long lists. So sitting down and making time for non-distracted brainstorming is really important for me. I have a feeling people are going to ask more questions about this as the stream goes on. So I'll leave it there for now and continue through the questions that people have been asking. How long does it take to become good at 3D modeling? I'll answer this like I've answered many of these questions, which I've got. Kevin Kennedy's YouTube channel, which is called Product Design Online, he has this class called Learn Fusion 360 in 30 days for complete beginners. I think if you do all of those videos, you are in a really good spot to 3D model in Fusion for 3D printing. That is what I did. I did have, the classroom experience as well as a bit of workplace experience with AutoCAD, but Fusion 360 is so different from AutoCAD that it's not a great comparison. And after I did that, I felt comfortable to design my own stuff. So take that class is what I will say. What else do we got? Do I think the full license for Fusion is worth it? If you are not making money from it, no. If you are doing it as a hobbyist, just get the free version. And yeah, Ryan Dirty literally said it. I promise I didn't read your comment. That is great minds think alike. I agree. Jeff at A Maker's Way, first learn the right way, then the fast way. That's a good way to sum it up. How do I get ideas for projects, and how long did it take you to learn 3D printing? So I kind of already answered the second question, but in terms of the first one, looking at my list of projects above my computer, you start by just doing like a brain dump, right? Like you get an idea, you write it down, and you collect those ideas. And then over time, I think it's nice to let those ideas marinate and figure out which ones are like really good ideas and which ones were you just like excited about in the moment. I think especially for me, like in wanting to make good videos, that's really important. I lost track of the question. How do you get ideas for projects? So, a lot of things like the functional 3D printing and other sort of like invention-y type build are just annoyances that I have in my life. One problem I've been struggling with for a while is the one wheel is really heavy and it's annoying to bring into stores. So I've thought about making some sort of backpack to like slip it into very easily. People have made one wheel like tennis bag style bags where you zip it in, but I don't love the idea of that because you have to fumble around with it and zip it in and out. Now, that I think could make a pretty good video. And I'm kind of like, I don't know how good of a product it would make. So because it's like, it doesn't feel great, I'm not really working on the video right now. That's one of those things that like, until I have some sort of breakthrough and think on it more, I don't really want to start it. I have some other ideas that feel a lot more alive. And those are the ones that I want to focus on. So yeah, I think that's where the state of ideas and projects is at the moment. Ooh, this is a fun one. Favorite tool under $50. Mine might be digital calipers. Calipers are great. If you're doing any sort of 3D printing or CNC work, calipers are amazing because you can measure thickness, you can measure interior diameters, you can measure depth. You can basically get all of the measurements that you need as long as they're within the length of your calipers. But other things under $50, see, that would be a good one to have like ready in the tank. I'm a huge fan of the Olfa knives. I use these like pretty constantly. So, these are like $10, but this is kind of like my favorite very sharp knife. Okay. Sander asks, have you ever been part of a makerspace? So when I was in university in Montreal, I would go to the free nights at a makerspace there, and I can't remember the name of it. And in hindsight, I wish that I signed up for a membership, and I think that would have really incentivized me to try to become part of the community and use it a lot more. I only really used it when I needed a tool that I didn't have, like their bandsaw or their drum sander. And, you don't get, when you're in a new workshop, it's hard to work safely and work well. Oh, I used their lathe as well. That was kind of cool. But I think in hindsight, I should have joined it. It would have been a great way to meet people and work on bigger projects and things. So if you have access to a makerspace and you want to do projects that you don't feel like you have the capacity to do, I would recommend joining one. And then I also worked for like a kids makerspace called the Steam Project. which was great because working there, I had constant access to all of the tools. Hey, Morley, is YouTube now your main full-time job? If not, what jobs have you done since doing your university degree? So YouTube now is my main full-time job, which I'm very grateful that I have the opportunity to do. But in the second question, what jobs have you done since doing my university degree? Okay, quick resume. Here we go. I worked at an off-grid lodge in the Rockies for 3 months directly after graduating, which was incredible. Lake O'Hara. It's the most beautiful place I've ever been in my entire life, and I was able to live there for 3 months. After that, I worked at an engineering firm, and I was just in the wrong place, and I quit that after 3 months. Then I did a bunch of stuff. I worked at a scenery company in Toronto because Toronto, there's a lot of films and TV shows are filmed there. So they do a lot of work for film and TV shows, learn a lot of great carpentry skills. Then COVID happened and I delivered food for Uber Eats on my bike. So I was biking around Toronto, delivering food for Uber Eats while making YouTube videos and sort of figuring out how big of a part of my life I wanted that to be and slowly getting better and doing other making things on the side. So I was also like doing a bit of commissioned leather work. Then I worked for the Steam project and I'm probably missing something. And now here I am. We'll leave it there. I'm really good at starting projects, but not finishing them. Any tips from Vergard Johannesson? That's a really good question. I think a lot of people have that problem. I feel it myself when I work on projects, but I think a good thing to get over it is having something that forces you to do it. If you're doing projects on your own, that have no outside constraints, yeah, you can just stop and move on to the next exciting thing. So you kind of have to make those constraints for it. You have to be your own boss. So I find it kind of comes down to tricking yourself and not thinking too much about it. All comes down to Shia LaBeouf, just do it. So put on some music that will just get you really motivated, focus, and just at a certain point, you just have to make yourself do it. And I wish I could have like a better mental trick than that. But I think a lot of the time, that's just what it comes down to. Like, stop thinking about it, just do it. And then, yeah, that's it. Okay, from Earl, you left Clamp to focus on your personal endeavors, but they/y'all publish weekly. Into the Spotlight is published less frequently. Do you still plan to continue that podcast? So Ryan and I haven't actually spoken in a little while. I feel Ryan, he just started a new job. He just moved. So honestly, I am not sure. I think we need to communicate about that. Yeah, I don't have a good answer for you. Cut Beyond Dreams. I'm now 1 year in my woodcraft business. How do I price my items without scaring away customers and not losing money at the same time? Again, I'm not, my main business is not making and selling woodwork. That is the caveat. But you asked, so, I can give my perspective. When you're pricing things at a high amount, your target market is small. So you're going to scare people away. It's just about finding that market. And I think a good way to do that is to try to find commission work. Instead of building things on spec, try to find someone who actually wants to commission you to build a very specific thing for them. People will always pay more for custom work. And then you have a better match of expectations. But yeah, I don't know. I'm sorry. I don't really have much of an answer beyond that. I want to make a wooden rocker box. It's like a baby cradle to sluice gold. Ever consider making one? I'm sorry. I have no idea what that is. So I can't really speak to it. John Wick, maybe the real John Wick, says, this isn't about 3D modeling, but have you ever seen Drake? No, I've never seen Drake, but I did see a concert at the venue that he opened in Toronto. It was Earth Gang, and it was an awesome concert. Finn Stokely says, hey man, do you think you'll get to do YouTube full-time anytime soon? I do YouTube full-time, and it's awesome. I'm very happy for it. Hunter Daniel, best tips for achieving self-employment. That's a very general question, which is hard to answer, not knowing what you do. Um, having a paycheck from someone else is an amazing feeling of security. And if you don't have that income, it's really for me at least, and I think for a lot of people, it's really difficult to feel relaxed and secure. I think creativity thrives when you're not stressed. And if your work is creative, then, you want to be careful, I think, about diving into it if that is going to make you stressed, if the lack of income is making you feel stressed. So I think maybe having a contingency plan can be really helpful. So when I left the Steam project to do this full time, my contingency plan was if I started to be hard up for money, I was going to take up bartending. I was very lucky in that I didn't have to do that because things started taking off at a really fortunate time. But it's a coping mechanism, and coping mechanisms can be very useful in that it allows you to not worry and kind of focus on doing the work. You can be like, well, if all else goes wrong, I'll just do that. Um, but yeah, it's a very general question, so I don't know if I can really offer any insights beyond that. Um, what else do we got? Was there a project that made you really proud, or is that with all projects you did/do? No, it's not equal with all projects. There's some projects that I look at and then like, I'm not happy with that. And you see the flaws, which is it's one of the curses with being a maker is seeing all your flaws and not being able to just appreciate as a whole. The think bigger sign right there, I love it because I love the message. I get to look at it all the time, even though it's not perfect. So like this was the first sign I made with this 3D printed strategy. And I made another one very soon after that and changed a lot of things. And it made the sign a lot better. But even though I did that, I'm still really happy with this one because as a whole, it delivers the effect so well. So that one for me kind of like stands out in my head. And a few years ago, actually more than a few years ago, this is when I was still in university. When I was really into leatherwork, I made Eden a journal cover. And I feel kind of bad because it was a year that we told each other that we weren't going to do Hanukkah gifts or birthday gifts, but I kind of forgot that we had that conversation. So secretly, I made her this journal cover, and on the back, I did a leather carving that said, "Today is a gift," and she still uses it, and she gets like all these compliments out of it, and it made this like really nice, heartfelt video. So that one really sort of stands out in my head. I'll leave it with those two for now. Oh, shout out Lake O'Hara. I'm in Nelson, BC. I have not actually traveled much around BC outside of working at O'Hara, so I'm not exactly sure where Nelson is. But my brother-in-law just moved out to Vancouver, so I'm looking forward to going out there soon and actually exploring BC outside of the beautiful Lake O'Hara Lodge. Any plans to continue teaching Eden woodworking in a video series? I really enjoyed y'all's last video. That's so great to hear because it was so much fun to make, and I think it's like one of the funniest, most engaging videos I've ever done, mostly because of Eden, because she's so good on camera and there was all these like unplanned funny moments that we captured. Yes, I would love to do more videos with that. And also just like feature her more in my videos. So if I'm working on something on the weekend and she's an opportunity to help, it'd be great to have her come in with some cameos. The sad thing is that that video is just not doing as well as I thought it would and hoped it would, which stinks when you're so happy with something and you think it's going to have this big appeal, but sometimes it just doesn't land the way you think it's going to. So Approved Trashed asks, for someone who is starting out in 3D printing, what 3D printer should they get? I mean, I haven't actually used very many 3D printers. I really like my Prusa for most of the reasons that everyone likes Prusas, in that I haven't really had many problems that I've had to solve that it seems like a lot of other 3D printer brands engender. Like, I think it's expensive, but it feels like you kind of get what you pay for. So if you want a 3D print and you don't want to have to tinker, the Prusa has done really well for me. So take with that as you will. Okay, this is a really nice question. Ratwork says, how do you get on being like the nicest guy on YouTube? I learned some valuable fusion type tips from you, but stay around because you're not cynical. Thank you. That's really, really awesome to hear. Um, the last part of your question is actually, I think, kind of hits it on the head, not being cynical. Um, I mean, I've had people in my life who are very cynical and I've really butted heads with them and it's really gotten on my nerves. So I think I really try to not be cynical. Um, I think that's kind of what it comes down to is I think there's a lot of cynicism in the world and it's very unpleasant. And I think there's a lot of great things that you can focus on. Like not to be naive, like obviously there's terrible things happening in the world all the time, but in terms of, you know, focusing my energies and presenting myself, I like being positive. And I've thought in the past about like, making more like edgy or short form content or things. And I think sometimes a certain style just isn't your personality. Anyways, that I'm kind of losing the point there. So I'm going to move on. Have I ever engraved one of my table builds? Yes, I've signed the bottom, if that's what you mean, but I haven't done like an inlay, which would be really cool. Having a shaper origin would be a great way to do that. I have been considering getting a shaper origin for doing stuff like that and like other joinery type things. Um, yeah. What else do we got? How did I build a following on YouTube? I don't know. I was very lucky to have put out. Okay, no one wants to hear that answer. Luck obviously is a part of it. I put out some videos that a disproportionate amount of people compared to my earlier year following really, really liked. So those were the punch clock. They wanted $100. I 3D printed it for 9 cents. The pallet table builds. Those did way better than any video on my channel previously. But I don't want to discount all the time and the people before that. Before those came out, I had around 5,000 subscribers. And I think at that point I put out like 100 videos. So that's a lot of videos and a lot of time. And I think a lot of times that's kind of what it takes. It takes time to find your style and figure out what types of projects you like and what lands with your audience. And I think a part of it, which shouldn't be discounted, is at a certain point, I think I decided that I wanted YouTube to be a career for me, or I hoped it would be a career for me. And I think that made me care a little bit more about the viewer on the other side and what would be engaging and entertaining for them. And I think once I thought more about that, it made my videos a lot better. Because when you're working by yourself, it's very easy to lose perspective, especially when you're making projects from your like own head. And when you think a little bit more about like, why is someone watching this video? Like, what is entertaining about it? Then you have an opportunity to make your videos a lot more engaging. Okay. Which 3D printers have I worked with? I've used the Prusa. I recently got the Elegoo Mars 3, the resin printer, which I really want to use more. I've only used a little bit so far, but so far my mind has been blown. And at the Steam project, they had a bunch of Flash Forge finders, which are quite inexpensive and seemed very durable. They had them for years and they like used them as a print farm. So they were just going with those. Let's see. Okay, we got some Prusa discussion. If you don't want to tinker is the important part. I love fixing and upgrading, so I almost like it if something breaks. Yeah, Tyler Barnes said that, and that's a great point. A lot of people in the 3D printing like that aspect of it. And if I wasn't making videos, I might enjoy that aspect of it. But I wanted to 3D print stuff. I didn't want to tinker with a 3D printer. Although I did buy the kit and I built it myself, which was a great, fun experience. And it was very empowering because now I feel like if anything were to go wrong, I would know how to take it apart and approach the issue. Okay. JF, I love your videos, especially the integration of Fusion 360 as a teaching tool. As a video idea, would you do more crossover between your woodworking and 3D printing with jigs and templates, for example? Yeah, I think that's a really cool idea. I've done a little bit of integration between woodworking and 3D printing. Sometimes I feel, sorry, I'm drinking carbonated water, so I'm a little burpy. Sometimes I feel that 3D printing isn't the best solution for a given problem. So when you're talking woodworking, right, and you're talking woodworking jigs, that might be something that's like large. It might be large and plate-like in manner. And for something like that, I think cutting it on a CNC or a laser makes a lot more sense because it's faster. And rather than extruding it from a long string of plastic, you're cutting it out of something that's already a sheet. And I think because I want to, my instinct is to try to use the easiest or like most functional solution possible. Sometimes it makes it that I don't use 3D printing for it because it doesn't seem that way. But that being said, I think there's lots of ways to use 3D printing in woodworking. Lots of people have done it. But yeah, it is definitely an interesting genre that to explore that I haven't done a lot of. All right. Do I have any advice when it comes to working on tolerances with 3D prints? I just can't seem to get my prints to fit well. So that is from Micah or Mika. Do a bunch of tests. Do a bunch of test fits and figure out like in your model, if it's 0.3 millimeters, does that mean it's going to be 0.3 millimeters in reality? Or does that mean that, there's some error from the extrusion? So test it out, iterate. That's one of the best things about 3D printers is that you can use them to rapid prototype. I think that's a very easy thing to forget when it comes to 3D printing, the rapid prototyping nature. And it's one of their biggest advantages, in my opinion. Let's see. Got some nice compliments. Did I expect that working with pallets would be a good hit? Big fan from the UK. That video, the first pallet table video, was such a spur of the moment idea that it's hard to like. I don't know if I had time to really have any real expectations. I think when I started working on the video, it felt different from anything I had done before. And before making that video, I just watched Ryan Trahan's Penny series. So that had a huge influence. His keeping track of money and the way he made that video was a huge inspiration for me. So, and it also got me really excited about making videos because it felt like he was doing something really fresh and new on YouTube. So I remember feeling excited and maybe thinking like this could be really good, but I don't know. I don't think I expected 3 or 4 million views, whatever it has now. If I'm right, you have a MacBook. Don't you have problems with programs? No, I don't have a MacBook. I have a ThinkPad T480, which I just installed 32 gigabytes of RAM into, which has been so good. So good. All right. So Vic Shea asks, if I had a Fusion 360 course on your website, I'd pay for that. Okay, yeah. So a lot of people have said this. A lot of people have requested a Fusion 360 course. And I think I could make a really good one, to be honest. But, it's a lot of time and effort. And as you can see, like I'm not even moved into this space yet. So maybe it would be something that I would do someday, but right now I'm much more interested about doing like singular, more entertaining slash inspirational sort of YouTube videos. But yeah, I could see myself maybe doing a course one day. It doesn't really feel like the thing I'm excited about one day. And this kind of brings it back to what I was talking about earlier in that for my creative fulfillment and to do my best work, I need to work on the things that I'm excited about. And right now making a Fusion 360 course, I don't really think it is. Where did I get the design for the most recent bed video? The links are in the description. I don't remember them off the top of my head. Eden and I looked together and she mostly found them by going through Pinterest. Does it make sense to split up the item you want to print so it does not take as long to get the right fit? Yes, it definitely does. I did that. I made this like cup holder that fit into like a nook in my car. I made that about a video when I was doing like 5 videos in 5 days. That was one of the videos. I think it's called like improving my car with 3D printing or something. And oh wait, was it that video? Maybe it was. That's a good video. You should go watch it. But yes, especially if you're printing something large, it saves so much time to print a small part, check the fit, adjust, and then print the larger version. 100%. I'm going to take a sip of water. Oh, this is a cool question. Okay, Tony B. What are your thoughts on product development? Have you considered making a product? If so, what does that path look like in your mind? I have thought about that. And in fact, I believe it was earlier this year. It was probably December of 2021 at this point. I actually thought I had a good product and I was developing it. And I'm not going to keep it secret because I don't actually think it's very stalled at this point. So, you know those like rectangular razor blades? So, I love those razor blades. They're really handy, they're super sharp. And I was thinking about how sometimes I like to use them like a knife, but there's not a great way to hold them. They're kind of made for those paint scrapers, but the grip on that isn't really optimized for a knife. So I thought about making a folding knife that's entirely 3D printed that holds those rectangular razor blades. And I actually made like 30 prototypes. I was bringing them to work one day, every day. I was having people test them out, but it really wasn't feeling right because, well, so there's a few reasons. One is I was printing them out of PETG, and I was printing them. I don't remember what it's called when you print something that's articulating and you take it off the build plate and it's ready to go. So I was doing that minus a bit of support material. So it was like printing flat, you take it up, you would bend it, and then you had a folding knife that you would insert a razor blade into. I made a spring, it was a printed in place spring lock. And it felt like pretty quickly that the springiness of it kind of went away, which felt very unsafe for a locking mechanism. And, I don't want to sell something that isn't working the way that I want it to. So there was that problem. But I think the larger issue is that pocket knives and folding knives, you want that to be like heavy and metal and wood. It didn't really feel like 3D printing was the best way to do that. It didn't feel like the best medium for that product. And I think when I realized that, I was like, okay, I've spent enough time on this. Let's move on to the next project. And since then, I haven't really thought a lot about product development. And maybe it's because that was kind of a negative experience in the end. It was good. I'm not going to say I didn't learn a lot from it, but it didn't end up going anywhere. And at one point I was really excited about it. So I would definitely be interested in product development in the future. Like, I got my Duresta ice pick right here, which is like the quintessential maker product. Everyone who sees one of these associates it with Jimmy Duresta. It's such a great tool. And everyone in the maker community like talks about like, I'd love to do my own like ice pick sort of thing. And that would be awesome. I just haven't recently put a lot of thought into it, but I could definitely see myself doing it someday. And again, 3D printing, great for rapid prototyping, and maybe not the best thing for the final product for something that I would want to make. So yeah, great question. Maybe some product development down the line. Okay, someone says, my 2 cents. I really like when you set up the on-the-spot 3D printed repairs. When I did the portable part on wheels with the portable battery, that was icing on the cake. Thank you. And there's going to be more of that coming in the future. Passion in your work is super important. 100%. Okay, Dwayne Dooley says, how do you in that space make good use of your dinner bell, which is right there. So I forged that at my friend Austin's house in Virginia 2 years ago. He had this event called High Caliber Camp, and a bunch of us went there and camped and spent a weekend forging and handing out. That was one of the projects. It was super fun. I don't really ring it very often, although I should use it like when I make dinner and it's ready. Actually, I should put that in the kitchen. That's the perfect thing to put in the kitchen. You hitting your leg on that bed frame was hilarious because that design is a reason why I didn't get a model like that. Yeah. That being said, I think people's complaints or comments about like shin hazards in furniture is, unless you have small children, I feel like it's a little silly because you become conscious of the furniture in your space. And like, it seems like every coffee table in a way is a shin hazard, right? Like it's all at shin level. So there's a possibility of banging your shin on it. So I don't fully understand, where that comes from, but I don't know, maybe correct me if I'm wrong. Is most furniture shin proof in some way? I understand like a bed with a frame that's flush to the mattress, obviously a lot less likely you'll hit your shin on it. But yeah. Okay, here we go. What is my 9 to 5 job? Being a YouTuber. What else do we have? All right, I'm getting up to present. So If people aren't asking many questions, that's probably when I'll end the live stream. Last time I went for about an hour, which I'm perfectly willing to do again. But if the questions slow down, that might just bring it to a natural conclusion. So keep asking questions if you want the live stream to continue. What song, loud or quiet? That's a fun question. So if I pick a loud song, I mentioned Earth Gang earlier. So Bank by Earth Gang is a very fun loud song. And quiet. Even like relaxing songs I like to listen to loud. I enjoy music loud in general, but anything by Fleet Foxes is great. I think quiet background music, or Big Thief. Fleet Foxes and Big Thief are two amazing bands. I need to stop rubbing my beard because I can hear it through the monitor making sound. How much does a 3D printer cost? There's a huge range. Is there a good one for $150? I don't know because I don't have one. I'm sorry. Tony B says, now that you're successful on YouTube, what's next? Making more YouTube videos, of course. You know, what does it mean to like be successful? Does it mean you've reached a certain point? I mean, I want this to be my job, and currently it is. But if I stop making YouTube videos, then it stops being my job because my videos, the way that YouTube works, my videos won't get views anymore. So I'm going to keep doing this thing that I really enjoy doing, which is making videos. And like, you know, all creatives, my work will probably shift. In fact, my next video will be very different from anything that I've put out before. But, you know, I know a lot of people here are here because they love the palette builds and other woodworking stuff. So rest assured that that's coming up as well. But we got some experimentation sprinkled in, and that's how we grow. We experiment and we see what sticks. Okay, imagine walking in the dark about the shin hazard. That's a great point. Thanks for bringing such creative, high vibe and playful energy to your videos. You're welcome. I'm really happy that that's how it comes across. Okay, this is a slightly different question on creativity, and this is very serendipitous because I did mention earlier that I will talk more about creativity later on in the stream. So Jason Edwin says, how do I generate ideas? So I think making time for ideas is important. So a lot of times when I go on a trip and I'm on the way back from the trip, whether I'm like riding in the passenger seat of the car or on a plane, somewhere where I don't have to like focus and I can just sit and write, I'll take out my notebook and write down all of the like interesting things that could generate product ideas that happened during that trip. So being present to those things, I think, is very important. Especially when you have conversations with people who you normally don't talk to, and it gives you perspective. So doing things that bring you perspective in general are a great way to generate ideas, getting out of your comfort zone, but then sitting down and synthesizing and figuring out what is valuable in there. Where are the good nuggets? What can you develop upon? That's really good. And for me, I like to follow what I'm excited about. And like for a 3D printed thing, like what is a pain point in my life that I can make a custom 3D printed solution for? Or for videos, you know, I look a lot at the YouTube homepage. Like, what are some ways that other people are making videos? Not so I can copy them, but so I can see like, oh, that's a really interesting way to engage people and entertain. Maybe I can play upon those emotions in my own way. Okay, what else do we got? Just curious, when is your birthday? March 23rd. How did your girlfriend like the woodworking class you gave her? Does she want to get into the hobby now as well? She really liked it. I mean, her reaction in the video was genuine. Like, I asked her at the end of the video what she liked, and she really did like it. In fact, today, after I do this, I'm going to go help her with a smaller woodworking project. She actually said this in the end of the video. Our dog doesn't like getting her nails clipped, so she's just going to make a little scratching board so that sandpaper will file her nails down. I don't know how much woodworking she'll do on her own. I think if we keep doing it together, because that was, you know, in the grand scheme of things, that project was a very small amount of woodworking. But in our lives together, I think we'll do a lot more woodworking. And I think as the time goes on, the workload will be a little more shared when we work on projects together. Can I sing Grizzly Bear Sleeping in the Cave? If you're referring to the band Grizzly Bear, great band. I don't know the song Sleeping in the Cave. Would you consider Catskill Mountain Maker Faire to be good for learners? Or is it more of a share your expert level stuff kind of thing? I saw your video and thought it was interesting. Oh, and then it continues. I'm interested in 3D printing, but not much else. So, first of all, it's not a maker fair. Maker Faire is a branded event. The Catskill Mountain Maker Camp is a separate thing altogether. So, kind of like I say in the thumbnail, it's kind of like Burning Man meets Woodstock sort of thing, in that there is burning of a large wooden effigy at the end, and there's a bunch of people camping in the Catskills. You know, I've never been to Maker Faire, but Maker Camp is very fun. It's very hands-on. It's anarchy in a really good way. Like, people are coming and just, like, doing a bunch of different stuff. I will say that there was not a lot of 3D printing there. There was other digital fabrication. There was, like, a CNC plasma cutter. There were projects that you were working on. But what I got the most out of was having conversations with other makers who were there, some of whom I had talked to through Instagram previously, some of whom I had never met before. But those conversations were my favorite thing that I got out of it. And, you know, working on the project and making the video were also great. Good for learners. I mean, you can go there and do a lot of hands-on stuff, but, like, it's very eclectic. So if you're expecting, like, to learn to do a weekend class on woodworking, I don't know if that's it. Like, it's doing a bunch of different stuff. Yeah. What are some things I wish I knew when I started 3D printing? I wish I improved my support material settings earlier on. I don't know. I'm not really sure what else. How long does it take you to edit your YouTube videos? It used to be kind of consistent, but because I've been doing all these different types of videos recently, it's really changed. And it's hard to calculate because I don't sit down and, like, edit for a full day. I'll do that amidst doing other stuff. Although as time has gone on, I do kind of partition my time a little more rigorously because I find that it makes me work more efficiently. But I'll say anywhere from, like, 8 to 16 hours, depending on the level of complexity. So, like, 1 to 2 work days if I'm really sitting down and doing it A to Z, A to Z. Okay. How have you found lasers versus CNC? They have their own benefits. Which is your favorite? That's a really interesting question from Stephanie Boyd. Um, I think laser cut stuff has a very specific look to it. And when I was working at the Steam project, we did a lot of laser cutting there. A big part of the Steam project's business is making, and it started during COVID, was making these, like, STEM kits to send to kids. And a lot of those were laser cut parts. And I feel like a lot of times now when I see laser cut stuff, I kind of associate it with kits. But when I see CNC'd work, it feels like a higher level of quality in some way. Now, there can be beautiful laser cut woodwork, definitely 100%. But I feel like I for some reason, like, I see CNC'd stuff as, like, better, like, without having those char marks. It just feels kind of like a higher level of finish. Um, CNC, like, the 3D nature of CNC is really good. Like, being able to CNC a box out of a solid piece of wood is not really something you can do with a laser, right? Because a laser is only cutting a kerf directly down, right? So you can't make a pocket cut in the same way that you can with a CNC. You could, it would just take a really long time and be incredibly inefficient. So I think maybe in a more basic answer, like, laser is very 2D and CNC is like 2.5D. It can be 3D or, you know, 5-axis if you're getting into that. Um, and laser cutters are really fast, which is great for a lot of stuff. Definitely way faster than CNC. In terms of maker tools, what do you think is the next big thing? Stephanie Boyd coming in with the fire. You got some good questions. I feel like 3D scanners are gonna enter the consumer market a little more. And I might be biased because I had the opportunity to use one and get scanned when I was at Maker Camp, and it was very mind-blowing. They are used pretty frequently now. Like people use Matterports a lot in real estate, like taking a 3D scan of a building and doing a virtual walkthrough. But I can just see in my own work using a 3D scanner for the 3D printed repairs, and it's so fast and such a high level of detail. They're still pretty expensive, so they haven't come down in price as much as 3D printers have, or at least it seems that way. But like the new iPhones have 3D scanners, which I've not used, and I'm considering getting a brand new iPhone, like among other reasons, to try the 3D scanner. Because if you can scan something with your phone and then immediately print it with the Elegoo is like what, like $300-400 in a super high level of detail, like that's amazing. Um, so that is something that definitely comes to mind. Okay, we got some questions coming in quick. Do you work a typical 8 to 5 day, or is it your okay, my own work? Do I work a typical 8 to 5 type day, or is your work time more fluid than that? So when I'm editing a video, I like to get up, have coffee, and then like sit down at the computer in my bathrobe and do a solid hour of editing. I find that like first thing in the morning, a lot of creatives say this, like doing a creative thing, like right when you get up is really fulfilling. I'm really motivated. It's a great way to start the day. And then I'll like take Abby for a walk, take a shower, and have breakfast, and then do like the next part of my morning. So, not being beholden to a job or a traditional schedule, I try to take full advantage of that. That being said, Eden, my partner, she works a traditional 9 to 5. So I'm also very cognizant of that, in that the time after her work is like the time that we can spend together. But, she also wants to do things on her own when she comes home. So I feel like most days, like after dinner, or if she's making dinner, if it's one of those nights, I'll like go back to work and do maybe like another hour of editing. Um, and so other than that, 9 to 5, I think, is a pretty good estimate. But I like taking a break in the afternoon and like going skateboarding, or doing an errand or something. And I think even people who work traditional office jobs, I think it's great if you can do that in any job. I feel like most people hit a natural productivity lag in the afternoon. And one of the great things about Jay, my boss at this team project, is he was very cognizant of that. And one of the things I loved about that job is there was all these different things to do, like from organization to 3D printing to like project planning to camp planning. So a lot of times around 2 or 3, I would go and like clean up the shop, or do some woodworking, do some like mindless maybe production task. Okay, let me hit on some more questions, and probably I'm going to tap out after an hour. Um, uh, okay, difference between resin and filament printer. Resin printers are messier than FDM printers, so don't discount that. FDM printers are a lot cleaner to use. Resin printers are a much higher level of quality. FDM printers, you can print larger things. I'll leave it there for now. Obviously, there are more differences. It seems I am preferring experimentation of new things over perfection of one thing / skill. Um, yeah, you know, I think it's important to make the distinction between the content of the videos and the videos themselves. So like at the end of the day, like I love making videos, and a lot of those happen to be centered around woodworking and 3D printing, but I'm interested in lots of different ways of expressing myself through video. And I think right now, this time in the year in my life, I'm in this kind of like slightly more experimental phase when it comes to the content. I think big part of that is having just moved and the growth that I've experienced recently. And, but this is a bigger question about experimentation versus perfection. There's definitely aspects of woodworking and 3D printing that I would like to spend some more time just like sitting down and doing. And, I think creativity, there's peaks and waves. There's times when you really want to focus in on one thing, and there's times when you want to jump around. And if you listen to yourself when you do that, I think that's when you do your best work. Um, okay. Will I deep dive at some point? Oh, it's a follow up to that question. I don't know. It depends what you're talking about when you say deep dive. Again, I think my deep dive is making YouTube videos. Like that is what I do. And the content of those may vary within what I'm doing, at that time. But there's themes that we keep coming back to. Outside of YouTube, do I have other revenue streams? So I have a Patreon page, which is, it's all connected to YouTube, right? Like YouTube is the center, and then there are things that add to that. As you've probably seen, I have sponsorships in my videos, which add to that revenue stream. And those are the main ones. I sell things from time to time, but the content is the main thing. What else? Are there any projects that I have put time into and try to do with 3D printing that never got a video since it wasn't successful? Yes. So, I talked about the folding 3D printed knife earlier, that nothing ever came out of that. Lots of learning, but no video or no product came out of that. Another thing that comes to mind is, so I have this little office trash can in here, which is kind of a comically small trash can for like a studio or a workshop. Anyways, it's trash that I have in here. It's an incentive to not generate much waste, I guess. And from time to time, the dog or the cat will try to get something out of it. And one week, they were doing it a lot and it was getting really annoying. And I kept putting the trash up on the desk. And I was like, this is not the best solution. I need like a place for this trash can that's not on the floor. So I had this is when I was back in Toronto and I had a smaller space. I had an idea to like make a 3D printed hoop that would clip onto the side of my desk that I could insert this into. So I 3D printed a prototype. A hoop is pretty big, so it took a relatively long while. And it finished. I put the trash can in, and the whole thing just just bent. A good example, kind of like I was mentioning before, about 3D printing not being the best solution for a given problem. Maybe if I made it thicker, it would have been better, but I think the easiest solution for that would have been just like a plywood disc with a hole in the middle, a ring, I guess is what it's called. But I think at that point I was just kind of like, okay, I'm going to, redirect my efforts elsewhere. Okay. Other questions. Would you care to recommend a few other maker channels for your viewers to check out? Maybe a couple smaller channels and maybe your favorite big name channel. I'm going to take a sip of water and then I'll answer that. So the fact of the matter is, I used to watch a lot of maker YouTube channels. But ever since I've gotten more into YouTube and making videos, I watch a lot less YouTube. And back when I was watching a lot of maker YouTube videos, I was very biased towards the bigger channels because I wasn't really deep diving into the community. Those were the things that I was seeing. So my watching is heavily biased towards those big channels, for better or for worse. I've dealt with some guilt in the past about that like I don't feel like I'm supporting my fellow makers. But the fact of the matter is, for my own creative process, when I'm doing a lot of video creation, it makes me want to like consume the types of videos that I'm making less. It makes me want to watch videos of other types of things. So there's the caveat, because this list is going to be biased towards bigger makers. So channels that have inspired me a lot, that I've gone a lot from: Jimmy DiResta, Laura Kampf, Jacko, especially when he was doing his daily vlogs. I got a huge inspiration out of that. And that was part of the big reason why I did the 5 videos in 5 days. I would love to do daily vlogs at some point in the future, but it's so much work. I don't know when that's going to happen. So make your channels. Ben Uader from Homemade Modern was a huge inspiration for me to actually start woodworking on the floor of my apartment. So if you have a small space, I would definitely recommend that. This Old Tony makes very engaging videos. For someone who does almost no metalworking, the fact that I can watch like a 30-minute video about engineering a mocha pot from a block of steel speaks to the level of his video making abilities. Other YouTube makers that I have gained a lot from. Early days when I was watching maker YouTube, Matthias Wandel was a huge inspiration for me. Like his marble machines, his like woodworking engineering was very, very cool. Okay. I'm going to wrap this up soon. Let's see if we have any other good questions. Oh, okay, this is interesting. I already tried to scan things with my iPhone 13 and it is absolutely not clean. It works for fun or measurement, but if you want it in 3D print, you can forget it. That's really good to know. Do I have a laser cutter? I have the laser cutter on the Snapmaker. It's not very powerful, so I don't find myself using it very often. It would be cool to get like a bigger laser cutter someday. What's the story of the bolt cutter on my wall? You will find out in my next video. Um, why did you use epoxy over other types of adhesive like shoe goo? I don't know which project you're referring to, but like epoxy is pretty strong. I think shoe goo is relatively flexible, so if you want a rigid adhesive, sometimes epoxy is a good way to go. Um, okay, I will end on this question because this is kind of like a cool, bigger question. From Happy Haru, when I first saw your channel's content, I thought that it was everything that I aspire to be slash do. How do you find the motivation to do what you do? What drives you? Um, I mean, I grew up when I was growing up, so I'm like 25, you can do the math. Um, YouTube was in a really exciting place. There were these channels like Epic Mealtime and Freddie W and Smosh and all these really like exciting burgeoning channels that were doing really, really well. And so I was watching a fair amount of YouTube as a kid, and it was always sort of something that I kind of wanted to do, but it took me until after university to realize that I could, I guess. And, you know, I'd put a lot of work in before that, before even considering that it is something that may become a career in its own way. Um, so, I really like making videos, and that coupled with the fact that they've gotten really good reception is fantastic motivation. Um, so doing what I love as a career, I will say that that is my drive, my motivation. Okay, I said that was going to be the last question, so that's it. Thank you everyone for coming. I'm going to publish the replay once it's all processed. See you next time. Bye.